Alright folks, how are you all doing? Just please let me know when you can hear me, and know that you can hear me so that we can kind of get rolling here. I just want to do the mic check while I get other things kind of situated and set up. So bear with me for a second as I bring up the notes over to my main screen here that you guys can see. All good. Alright, sweet. So it sounds like we're rolling here. So just to kind of address the questions that I see immediately here, you know what, maybe I'll just kind of start with a once-over of the notes. I'll be able to answer those questions in the meantime, and that way anyone who watches after the fact will be able to kind of just get a whole once-over too, and it won't be necessarily completely pointed. So the inventions are going to come up pretty quickly, but since you all asked, the cat is literally right here. He's just hanging out in front of my keyboard here underneath the screen. So pardon, you know, I'm sorry if he kind of jumps on the keyboard and stuff and messes me up here for a second or two. But anyway, so let's kind of get rolling here. So all of these notes are on Blackboard. Natalie, cat, you're messing me up. He's falling on my keyboard here. All right, so. All the notes are on Blackboard. They're in a PDF version, and you should be able to get kind of 4 slides at once. So they're all up there. This is the same thing that you use your guided notes for in class. So you know, if you want to follow along with those, you can, obviously. Otherwise, it's all going to be up here, right? So your quiz tomorrow, it's 30 questions, so I guess it's a little bit of a larger quiz, but it's on the age of exploration and the age of discovery, right? So what does that entail, right? So for starters, and this is kind of just the background, I know it's kind of a wall of text a little bit, right? But one of the big things that we needed to know, right, is that a lot of these routes, these trade routes that had existed, these ancient trade routes, as we kind of had spoken about and we had talked about and we did the mapping of and things like that, that all, it was basically leaving Europe overland more or less, and the sea routes that we knew, you know, that basically went around the Mediterranean, you know, Arabian Peninsula kind of thing as well, you know, and ultimately once we get the Portuguese that worked their way around Africa, right, and that at a certain point you get the expansion west, right, and there's basically in the middle of the 1400s, you're going to have the Byzantine Empire actually falling to the Muslims, and the fall of Constantinople, which more or less acted as kind of that gateway between Europe and ultimately into Eurasia and Asia, right? So when that fell to the Muslims and they wouldn't really allow Christians through that area peacefully, it became an issue for these Christian nations in Europe that had basically grown accustomed to all of these trade routes, so they looked for different ways to get around Africa and also to expand westward. You know, you had Columbus, obviously, who's going to be saying that you can get west. You can get to the Indies by going west, right? He's going to grossly underestimate the size of the world. It ended up being 30, Rebecca. Sorry about that. That's what kind of Mrs. Kipperman and myself kind of settled upon when it was all said and done. We cut that down even a little bit, so sorry. So anyway, so as a result, right, you're going to have all of these nations kind of seeking to get on the water to kind of get around Africa and kind of make these trade routes happen that they had grown used to, since they no longer could make them happen over land because of the fall of Constantinople, right? And that's going to be a big thing that you're going to want to remember, right? So on this map, Constantinople is kind of right here. Can I make this a pointer? There we go, beautiful. So you get Constantinople where I'm circling. Sorry, my thing automatically opens up pictures there, so that's why it's doubling up there on the top left. But Constantinople is right here, right? So coming from Europe, where my pointer is moving, you know, that's where they would get across, right? So they had to come up with different ways, right? So this is kind of this Silk Road that we had talked about in class, and you kind of had mapped and all that good stuff, right? Then you obviously have all these other routes kind of from here, from around the Arabian Peninsula to India, and so on and so on. That were things that are going to need to trying to figure out how to make these things happen now with this area now being under control of the Islamic Empire, right? So that's the big reason why you get the exploration around Africa by the Portuguese, right? So what are other reasons? some of these other reasons that we are working on and talking about, right? It's all riches, right? It's demand for, it's economically based, right? So it's demand for gold and spices and other natural resources that you're going to, that they want in Europe. There was wealth to be made, and ultimately that's, what these traders are doing. They're trying to figure out how to continue to make all of this profitable, right? Additionally, you're going to have European nations that are interested in pushing Christianity around the world, right? Especially with the Crusades and the Reformation and the expansion of those kind of different ideologies. Just the diffusion and the spread of Christianity is going to become a major thing that is going to push this exploration, right? So it's kind of this God, gold, and glory. We're going down to our triple G's here, right? So the last part is that it's economic competition between the European countries. European empires are not really countries at this point. These European empires and kingdoms, but also just individually, right? You have people like Cortez getting renowned for conquering the Aztecs, and people like Pizarro following along, trying to ultimately make a name for himself too, right? So this glory plays a huge part in the individual aspect for exploration too, right? So the only inventions that you're going to be required to know, I know we did a little bit more in class. I think there were 7 we actually talked about in class from the project standpoint, right? But what we're going to ask you to know are these 3, right? Oh, no, sorry, not 3, these 5. Sorry, I can't count tonight apparently. So the compass, right, is being a big one. The compass using the magnetic poles of the Earth to be able to decide direction, right? The Caravel, which is this. So we'll get to that in a second, Kai. We're going to go through the whole shebang here, right? So you have the Caravel, right? So the Caravel being this kind of faster ship that's really designed for this trade and travel, right? And takes advantage of your triangular sail, which is coming from, let's say, Arab Latin sail is otherwise what it's known for and known as, right? So you have this triangular sail that can now, in conjunction with using it in the Caravel, you're able to basically have these ships that are able to go against the wind. They basically catch the wind, and they use the rudder also to kind of finagle and move their way into situations where they can kind of go against the wind, and then ultimately catch more wind, and then go back, and you kind of do that tacking that we talked about in class, right? So you have the Astrolabe too, the thing that can use to get these astronomical measurements and basically figure out your latitude and longitude and tell time and all sorts of good things, right? We watched that video, the TED Talk about it in class. We also have the Sextant, which is able to similarly look at the stars and kind of take triangulation of where you're kind of located on a map and such. So those are the big inventions that you're going to need to know. So definitely familiarize. You're definitely going to familiarize yourself with that. So any issues with internet and things like that, this will all be saved on YouTube later. That if you miss a spot, you can go back, or you should even be able to rewind from here to not necessarily be live and be 30 seconds to a minute behind and things like that. I would know all of these. Yeah, it's only 5. It's not that many, right? So here's the Caravel, right? So this is the ship, right? So you see these the triangular sails that it's able to kind of manipulate and use with the rudder in the back of the ship to be able to kind of catch wind from different directions and then be able to kind of go directions that the wind isn't necessarily blowing, right? So the triangular sail that is able to swivel on this mast to be able to catch the wind from different directions, right? And then you're able to kind of manipulate the boat that way to create that tacking, right? You have the Astrolabe, right? So we saw the video, but this is just kind of a picture of one. It's a little grainy. Sorry about that. You have the Sextant, similarly. So these are just kind of, again, the inventions for sure. So you should be aware of those, right? Whoops. Sorry. So Portugal is going to be your first big exploration nation. You have a man named Prince Henry, the navigator, which we'll talk more about in a second, but he drives this push for exploration, right? And they are on the Atlantic Ocean, right on the Atlantic Ocean, and they're also close to Africa, which you're going to see on this map right here, right? So Lisbon, Portugal is right here. Spain is ultimately to the east of it, right? But it makes this real easy an avenue to kind of explore, around here, and then ultimately, around Africa, and then up into the Indies and things like that as well. So they're going to be leading that push in exploration for sure in Africa. as well. And of course, once the New World is discovered, there's going to be some Portuguese exploration over there too, which is one of the big reasons why you have Brazil being Portuguese today, right? So it's close to Africa, and this whole, Prince Henry the Navigator, he's played as this kind of pioneering role of exploration in Portugal. He's this big figure. Maybe tomorrow I'll try to see if I can dig up my pictures from the Exploration Museum that actually is in Lisbon. I was there a couple summers ago. And I took some pretty cool pictures, and there's some pretty neat statues and a lot of models and things of these ships that these people used. But Henry the Navigator, he's kind of this Portuguese prince, right? And he's got a lot of money and a lot of wealth, and he's able to kind of fund a lot of the exploration in the area because he was interested in it, and he supposedly created a school of navigation and exploration, and to train people to kind of use these different instruments that we just talked about, and to push the limits of exploration and for Portugal and exploration. So he's a big important figure in this, and he's something that could very well show up on your quiz tomorrow. So be mindful of him. Other important, sorry, I'm just trying to go through all the little individual things here, right? So other important European explorers that you should familiarize yourself with is Vasco da Gama. He's also Portuguese, and he's an explorer, right? And he's going to be the first Portuguese man to go completely around Africa. That's going to be important. Of course, you have other guys that they work their way around the western coast. They don't get quite all the way around, right? And da Gama is going to be the first one to get all the way around and go to India and get back, and that's going to be a big deal because it expands the boundaries, right? It shows that this is possible and this can be done for sure. So obviously you also have Spain playing a part of this once they kind of get rolling, and once all this starts happening, right? They don't want to be left behind, and they're going to arguably be the one that's going to be most profitable here on some level because they get their foot into the New World first, right? And that New World is going to be very profitable for Spain as an empire, right? Christopher Columbus, he comes on over. He's going to ultimately have 4 voyages to the New World around Hispaniola is what they called it at the time. And it's going to be modern-day Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, some of the other islands as well in the Caribbean for sure. But he never actually lands in the United States today. What would we consider the United States today, actually. He never lands on the mainland. He is pretty close, though, down in Central America and such. So from the Spanish exploration, right, you're going to have Hernan Cortez. I'll get there, Kai. So you have Hernando Cortez, right, and Hernan Cortez is a Spanish conquistador. He's going to become known for conquering Mexico, right? You guys probably talked about the Aztecs a bit in World 1, and he's going to be the man that makes this happen for the Spanish, right? He kind of goes from the Caribbean, gets into Mexico, gets a bunch of allies with the groups there that weren't necessarily happy with the Aztecs, and he's able to use them and manipulate them into eventually kind of taking control of the Aztecs and conquering them, in addition to his own men, of course. So he's a big guy, and I would say for sure know him because I can tell you he's going to be on there. So that's going to be useful, right? So then from talking about that glory aspect, right, you have this man named Francisco Pizarro who's next, right? 10, 15, 20 years later, he's going to basically follow in the footsteps of Cortez, and he's going to basically do something very, very similar down in South America. He's going to conquer the Incan Empire, which is on the western coast of South America, in modern-day Peru and modern-day Chile, is where this, up in the Andes Mountains there, essentially. And he's going to kind of follow this glory, right? He's going to want his own glory, and he's going to do that, and it's going to bring in a lot of wealth and riches into the Spanish Empire. Also Spanish, you have this man named Ferdinand Magellan, who very well could show up there as well on in your quiz tomorrow. He is the first crew, anyway, to make it all the way around the world. He gets pretty close himself. He gets to the Philippines from sailing west from Portugal or from Spain, anyway, sorry. And he ends up dying in the Philippines, but his crew ends up finishing the trip, right? But that's just another thing that Spain is able to claim at the time period. My cat is on my keyboard, sorry again about that. And here is the picture to prove it. So anyway, it's a big important piece of the puzzle, right, for Spain, to be able to to be able to go all the way around the world, it's a pretty big deal, right? And then England's going to follow that up with Francis Drake, right? They're going to want to send someone around the world too to get to basically have this renown themselves and be able to say that they did as well, and to also see what's over there, right? It's not like the Portuguese and the Spanish are kind of sharing all this information with each other, for sure, right? So Francis Drake is the first Englishman to sort of sail all the way around the world, right? And we did this in your on your notes the other day, right? When you went through the book and things like that, we're able to fill this stuff out. So for French, you have a man named Jacques Cartier. It's a very French-sounding name. He is an explorer as well, and he's going to ultimately claim Canada for France. He's going to come down the St. Lawrence River and get basically down toward Montreal from the Atlantic Ocean, and found Quebec and that kind of stuff in that area. So that he's going to be, that's a very important figure too, because that's why Canada speaks French today, at least up Montreal, north of us. You do have British Canada as well, but this is French, and that's why many of them still speak French today. It's funny how that works, right? So ultimately, as Europeans establish these colonies and trading posts in the Americas, Europe is going to seriously impact these areas, right? They bring their weapons, they bring their diseases, they bring all these different things, right? They bring colonists and things. Of course, and religion. They're going to have a serious effect on the areas that they are now exploring and starting to settle and live in and things like that, right? So you have these colonists, right? They set up colonies. The whole idea is to take advantage of natural resources and wealth and things like that, right? And then ultimately, they're going to bring their religion with them. It's going to be Christianity, but it's also going to be Catholicism and Protestantism, right? A lot of the American settlement is going to be Protestant-based, for sure. You're going to have the Puritans and things like that up in Massachusetts, which I'm getting a little off topic here, but you're going to have these people trying to push for conversion of the indigenous peoples that were here, the natives. The Aztecs and the Incas in particular the Spanish are trying to push conversion on these people, because they saw them as less than them, right? They had these weird customs and things like that were hardly Christian, and as a result, they looked at them as less than them, and that ultimately they needed to convert them and to save their souls, essentially, right? So, partially as a result of that and the conquests and things like that, and other influences, you're going to have the demise of the Aztec and Incan empires, led by the Spanish, right? Cortez with the Aztecs and Pizarro with the Incas. You're going to have what's called a forced migration of many Africans into slavery. You're going to have Europeans that are basically working with many of the West African tribes, and the West African tribes are able to kind of raid the interior, if you will, and be able to kind of gather up their enemies, which had been their enemies, and bring them back and sell them to the Europeans and make money for it, right? So that's kind of partially how you get this forced migration of enslaved Africans that are being brought to the New World now to fill a labor hole, right? And many times these colonies are going to imitate the culture and the social patterns, right, of their parent company, for sure. So something to kind of keep in mind, right? So the slave trade is obviously a huge impact in Africa. You're going to set, especially Portugal, is going to be setting up mostly these trading posts along the coast. Other nations do as well, obviously, but Portugal was the big one to start here. And that's, they work with these West African tribes, essentially, to be able to kind of bring in people and sell people, and to get people for a lot of the manufactured goods from Europe. They're able to trade for. So that's what you get, this triangular trade, right? You have this kind of manufactured goods that are coming from Europe at the time, right? And they're being brought down to the western coast of Africa, where they meet up with these trading posts and things like that, and the West African tribes, and ultimately they're going to fill up their boat with the slaves, and then they're going to head west to the Caribbean, a lot of times, where these people were brought to and managed, and then ultimately brought to America or Mexico and Central America and South America to be sold. And then what they would do is they would fill their holds again with whatever natural resources and raw materials that they could get. The European, in many cases, it's sugar, it's cotton, it's rum, tobacco, coffee, and things like that, and they bring those all the way back to Europe, and it completes the triangle, right? And you just kind of keep doing that over and over again. You're never wanting to have your cargo holds ever really empty. It wouldn't make sense, right? It'd be unprofitable to go across the Atlantic for weeks and weeks at a time and not actually have anything in your cargo holds. So that's why, you know, it's 3 legs here. It's called triangular trade. So this is going to be really, really important because it's gonna really link the Americas, and it's going to link Africa and Europe, and you're going to get this interconnectedness between them, right? And that's going to be super important. And as a result, you're going to get what's known as the Columbian Exchange, right? So the Columbian Exchange is going to be a sharing of goods. I'll answer your. So Natalie, I'll show you in about 2 seconds here, okay? Actually, you know, I'm just going to break from the notes for a second to show Natalie where these are so that she can follow along. Let me bring this up. My cat's probably getting in the screen there for a second. I'm just logging into my Blackboard and showing you guys where this stuff would be. Okay, so if you come here to Blackboard, Natalie, to answer your question, you can go to Course Documents. So in Course Documents, you have Class Google Drive access and your past warm-up. So if you go to Class Google Drive, this is tricky because it's actually mine, so this isn't really the greatest. Let me log out here, sign out. Actually, I don't know if I can sign out because I'm streaming here, but we're going to see. Okay, so this is what it should look like for you. If you're not logged in, either way, you should be able to see it. So here's our units. Here's the syllabus. Here's the standards, if you guys are interested in reading those just for kicks. Here's the units. We're currently Age of Exploration. So when you open it up, the notes are right here. And you can just open it up, and it's in a PDF form, and you can just kind of print them or follow, you know, zoom in and what you need, and follow along, right? Okay, so does that clear that up, Natalie? Hopefully. And we can get back to our discussion on the notes, although now I need to log back in, it looks like, because it kicked me out. So bear with me while I get the notes back up here, guys. Sorry about that. Sorry, I need to look past my cat here. Hopefully I'm still broadcasting. I lost my thing, so where is this? Alright, I just need to get back so I can see what your guys' text is and things, since when I logged out, it messed with me. Cat, you're in my way, man. Okay, okay, so, back to the notes. Let's find where we were, sorry. So, back to the Columbian Exchange, right? And there I can actually see Natalie on the notes as well. And Sam, right. Okay, so you have this exchange of goods, right, back and forth between the old world and the new world. And there's a lot of things that existed in the old world that didn't exist in the new world, and vice versa. So when this connection is made with Columbus, and you get the first contact, right, it's a real big deal. Right, because you're going to have a lot of things now that are going to seriously affect the way things are done in Europe, right? You're going to have a lot of agricultural products, such like corn and potatoes and tomatoes and tobacco and things like that, that are going to completely change how the Europeans do everything. You know, you hear about the Irish and potatoes and things like that. Well, potatoes didn't exist in the old world, and they were brought over after all of this, right? Additionally, you're going to have other sorts of beans and things like that. Obviously, you know, you're only going to be held accountable for what's here on the slides here and what's in the screen. But these, to get a little more further in depth here, what's going to happen is that when you are growing crops, right, the crops take nutrients from the soil. And so a lot of the old world crops, what would have to happen is they would need to basically leave part of the field not growing anything for a year to replenish crops, and it would decrease crop yields and things like that. So luckily for the Europeans, you're going to kind of have a bit of an agricultural revolution in Europe a little bit when you get these new crops coming in, because some of these crops, things like potatoes and these beans, are actually going to kind of help replenish some of those nutrients in the soil, so you now all of a sudden won't actually need to have a part of your field lay fallow, is what it's called, and that ultimately you can kind of continuously do this crop rotation of these different crops, and you can have a much larger yield and be able to feed more people, and that's pretty important, right? European animals that didn't exist in the New World. You're going to have horses and things like that didn't exist. Cattle, pigs, a lot of these things, all these farm animals that we think of today, right? A lot of them were not here in the Americas, and they were brought over from Europe. And they're Eurasian origins, essentially. Also, diseases are going to be huge, right? You're going to have this population that had been broken off, essentially, from Europeans and Eurasians and Asians, and they've been broken off for thousands and thousands of years, essentially, completely after basically completely after any sort of agricultural revolution, things like that happened to really get humans going and building new civilizations and things like that. So a lot of the diseases that developed in Europe and things are not going to actually be in the New World. So when this contact happens, and some of these diseases being pretty gnarly, especially smallpox, if you don't believe me, look up some pictures of people that have smallpox or had smallpox. It's pretty nasty stuff. The smallpox is going to be responsible for killing millions upon millions of American natives. I've heard upper estimates of about 100 million natives that were here. That's probably a bit too far. Even if you dial that back by half and say 50 million or so in the New World, the estimates are about 90+% of these are going to ultimately be killed by the diseases after contact, and that's a pretty serious number, right? So keep that in mind as well. These diseases, and smallpox in particular, are going to be really important. I'm going to take my cat and put him on my lap because he's not staying where he's supposed to be. So this is just a different representation of what we were kind of just talking about, right? So this is kind of a lot of things coming from the new world, right? Squash and pumpkins and sweet potatoes and things like that, right? And ultimately, they're going to make their way over to Europe and vice versa, right? So you have diseases and smallpox, influenzas, all sorts of different things, livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses. So you can just kind of take a look at this on your own time to kind of read some of these, but the things you're going to need to know are all on this slide in particular. Okay, so we're pretty much at the end here. We have a couple more last things here, and then we're going to be done. Pretty good, under half an hour or so. So you're going to have a plantation system that's going to become apparent in the Caribbean and in the Americas. Sorry, I didn't mean to change that. So you're going to have these big farms, essentially, that are going to require a ton of labor and people to actually be able to make them work, right? It's just they're so large, and that's where these African slaves are really going to come into play, right? And the slavery is going to mostly be based on race. Originally they were hoping to use the Native Americans, but the Native Americans, when they start dying from diseases and things, and they're not really suitable for this type of thing because of them just all dying from the disease and all sorts of other things. So it comes down to the Africans that are being brought over are going to be the main aspect of it, right? So slavery is based on race, and I can tell you that's something like that you should know for sure going into tomorrow, right? And that gold and silver and the riches that are going to be found is going to be all exported. It's going to be taken out, right? It's going to be taken out of this area and brought to the New World in Portugal and in Spain and all sorts of different things, right? So that wealth coming out is going to be maybe major player, in driving a lot of the different things we were talking about, right? The Spanish Armada trying to invade England and things like that, which we talked about last unit. That stuff's going to all be, you can turn on my keyboard here probably. So all that stuff is going to be funded more or less by the fruits of the exploration and the colonization that's going on in the New World, right? I don't know what this picture is supposed to be. It's kind of a dead picture, it looks like, but there is an animation. Let me see if I can bring it up. Cat, you're messing with my mouse. Okay, let's see if I can open it. So here we go. So this is just that triangular trade. So that link, if you wanted to follow it, you can kind of, it looks like it's interactive. You can kind of follow along. This is Miss Gipperman's. So, all right. So, any last questions? I hope I addressed everything. I think we went through the whole notes, so that everything. There's not going to be any surprises if you kind of followed all along that. You should be good to go and ready for this quiz tomorrow. Okay. Any last questions? And if not, I'm going to kind of sign off and let you guys go and study for yourselves. Alright, folks, have a good one. Enjoy studying and enjoy the rest of your night, and we will see you tomorrow, and hopefully you're all going to kick some butt. Have a great night. Goodbye. Anything on those notes, Kevin, can show up on this quiz tomorrow. Okay? The dog is downstairs. I'll see if I can bring him up if you guys want to hang tight for like 2 minutes here. I'm going to carry him up the stairs. He'll probably be weirded out. Hey, Miles. Alright, he's coming. He's here. Good boy. I just gave him his treat. Let's see if I can. Okay. Give me a minute. He needs to eat his treat. He might go downstairs again. No, he needs. Oh, he's going downstairs. No. He might not make his debut. Sorry, guys. Sorry about that. So, next time, come for the dog, you get the cat. See you guys later. Have a great rest of your night.